Hello, everyone. Welcome to this installation of the Lion's Den. My name is Ashanti Carter, and I serve as the doctor. Oh, almost, y'all. It's almost Dr. Carter. Yes. But anyway, I serve as the Director of Community College Partnerships at Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science. And I am thrilled to have all of you join us. You guys, this conversation is going to be amazing. I have some esteemed panelists who are going to speak on the subject of heroes need help too. So creating a healing community. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I'm going to ask each of our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves and answer the question, what drew you to this work? So the work that you do. All right, I'm going to start with Dr. Clarke. All right, Dr. Clarke, introduce yourself to the people and tell us what drew you to this work. But you're muted. Go ahead and unmute. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon or evening. I am Dr. Kalaki Clarke. I'm a board-certified family physician from Los Angeles. I currently practice at Los Angeles Christian Health Centers in downtown LA in Skid Row. I'm also an adjunct clinical instructor, volunteer at the USC Keck School of Medicine. And I have a real strong passion for mental health advocacy. So I was drawn to medicine since I was a child. At 5 years old, I saw my sister go through challenges that made me admire the fact that you can go to one person and go to another person to get fixed, so to speak. So then at a very young age, I had the desire and then followed all the steps to get to that point to become a physician eventually. The road wasn't easy, but I can talk about that later.
All right, I love it. Dr. Chavez, introduce yourself to the people.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Ashanti. And yeah, it's great to be here with everyone, and I'm honored. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Noe Chavez. I'm currently an assistant professor at Charles Drew University in the Department of Social Sciences and Humanities in our psychology program. And I'm a trained community psychologist. I actually did not know about community psychology when I first was an undergrad, until actually even up to through graduate school. Then later I transferred my third year. My advisor moved to Chicago and I followed her to Chicago and I switched programs to community psychology. But I started in social psychology, social personality psychology in graduate school. And I originally actually wanted to become a psychotherapist, and my wife is a psychotherapist, and I wanted to help people with mental health issues, and really drawn to that role. And then I learned about also the variety of different options and careers within the field of psychology, how just wide the field is, and learned about social psychology and social issues and how they intersect with our mental health. So I really kind of was motivated to learn more about how the concept of culture and how cultural issues and society and poverty, the social determinants of health impact our mental health. So I think it was fate that I ended up transferring with my advisor to community psychology during graduate school. And that has given me the tools and the approaches to kind of do community-based participatory research or partner research that helps, kind of understand that intersection of context with mental health.
I love that. I love what you said with culture as well. I mean, that really pricked my ears. So thank you. So last but certainly not least, Evan, introduce yourself to the people and tell us what drew you to your work.
Hello, everybody. My name is Evan Bowman. I just finished my first year at Yale University as an undergraduate. I'm going into my second year. and I'm majoring in the history of medicine and science and public health, and also on the pre-medical track. I became interested in medicine for as long as I can remember, but I know that what really spurred me into action was learning about research that I could do and different health disparities that were affecting especially the people around me. Specifically in high school, I started doing some research on fibroid tumors, which disproportionately affect Black women. And I had seen that happening to my aunts and my mom, and I really wanted to do something about it. And I knew that I wanted to do work with my hands. I wanted to do work where I could talk to people and help people and really make a difference in people's lives.
I love it. I think that's so beautiful. So there's a commonality with being that altruistic person, you know, wanting to give back. So I love it, and thank you so much. So let's talk about being a student and mental health. All of us have either completed college or we're currently in college. That's Evan and I, you know, we are gluttons for punishment, right? So I remember being a student, especially an undergrad student, and I was stressed out. So talk to me about what stressors did you guys encounter while you were in college? And did you recognize that you were struggling mentally? So I want to kick it off with you, Evan.
Yeah, I think just finished my first year, and I kind of jumped into a very rigorous academic schedule. And there were times when I was just not expecting to have so much work on my plate. It would come on suddenly. And then I think also just it took me a bit of a learning curve to learn how to study and how to manage my time and how to also make time to, you know, call my family back home and hang out with my friends and not just completely isolate myself. So I will say that I needed to schedule in breaks for myself, but I also needed to schedule in time to plan. And I kind of fell back on making lists and using my Google Calendar. This became big helps for me, but there were definitely stressors that came up, and of course, like my work with Youth Advisory Council and also with clubs at school, I was being pulled in a lot of different directions at times, but I had to keep coming back to why I'm doing all of this. And part of that is also taking care of myself. So scheduling in those breaks, coming up with methods to manage my time were really helpful for me.
Yeah, we call those non-negotiables. So for all you students out there, the non-negotiables are your breaks, working out. You could be a gamer, you know, if it's a couple of hours of playing games, those are non-negotiables. So I'm going to pass it to you, Dr. Chavez. Talk to us about when you were a student. What stressors did you encounter, and did you know that you were struggling mentally?
Yeah, it's been a while now since I've been a student, but not too much, but and you know, I reflecting back, you know, for me, started as an undergrad, you know, and I was a first gen, you know, student, first in my family to go to college. And so, and even though I went to a university in my hometown, so I still lived at home, you know, and went to college. That was in El Paso, Texas. I was born in Juarez, Mexico, and grew up in the border. And you know, the predominant student population is Latinx, is Mexican, immigrant Mexican American. They're like, say, like 70% or so. So very unique, very different from other universities across the country. And even with the diversity, you know, it was a struggle for me, even living at home. I think it had to do with being the first to go to college, and for me, it was like a different culture, and I, you know, study some of the issues that I study is, you know, acculturation and cultural identity. And so I can apply that like model to kind of, as I reflect back in my experience and making sense of some of the challenges, it was really kind of learning how to navigate another culture, another country. For me, you know, academia, again, even though like a lot of the student population ethnically were predominantly Mexican, but, you know, the graduate students and the faculty were still predominantly, you know, white Caucasian, even in there in El Paso, Texas. So I did feel like a disconnect and trying to fit in and find myself, and being an introvert, highly, introverted, quiet, and extremely shy. I've struggled with overcoming shyness, and never imagined like being in spaces where I had to present and speak, in public. I was terrified. That was part of the challenge for me. And I think that was the first time I had a panic attack, anxiety in my experience. I thought I was having a heart attack, right? The symptoms of like I had trouble breathing and my heart was racing, and my thinking was all over the place, and I was catastrophizing, situations, and really, I think because of the anxiety, right? And I wasn't sure, I didn't know what was happening to my body, right? And so it then, that was as an undergrad. That's the first experience that I had with anxiety, and then I learned about that. I learned about anxiety. I never went to see anybody, get any professional help, and I think that's tied to the stigma, right? Being from a Mexican American family community, things you see that stigma. Although I think it's changing, luckily, but I think it's still there. I think that played a role, and but over time, I think what helped is finding my community. So I did like a summer program that was with other students similar to me that were first gen students, and predominantly Latinx and African American. And I found my community. I connected, and I realized I wasn't alone in that process. Other people had similar struggles with their mental health and trying to fit in and understand. As we're learning a lot of different things, it could be intellectually very challenging, and it challenges who you are. And I was socialized. I grew up, very religious and being Catholic, and my culture and stuff like that. And it sort of some stuff that I was learning was challenging that. So that was also contributing. But when I found my community of other students, that helped feel like not alone anymore. And I felt like I fit in, and that was sort of the turning point for me. And then got motivated with that community to, move on and pursue graduate school. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's so powerful what you talked about, what you stated with the panic attack. So many people think, oh my goodness, I'm having a heart attack. No, it's a panic attack. And being introverted, being shy. And now you have a PhD. So yes, you are a thought leader in your field. So for the students out there just listening to Dr. Chavez, yes, the breathing, all of that, those are symptoms of a panic attack, and don't sit in that, go and get help. And as he stated, he found his community. I usually say you find your tribe, and those people around you who can support you. Thank you, Dr. Chavez. So Dr. Clarke, come on, bring us home. Talk to me. Talk to me about what it was like for you in college. You're muted.
Okay, yes. So actually, college was not too bad, which was great, and I got the rude awakening later on. So college was good, So that's why by the time I completed medical school, that was actually good. There was a little bit of anxiety maybe in my third year of medical school, just because of the transitioning from being in the didactic setting the first 2 years and going into the hospital, that transition and kind of like being on the spot, so to speak, as opposed to just studying
Dr.
on your
Clarke,
own.
tell us what's didactic. What is that?
Oh yeah, so the first 2 years, it might have changed. I think now they're more integrating clinical experiences into the first 2 years, from what I can tell. But essentially, when I went to medical school in the Stone Ages between 2001 and 2005, it was essentially lectures the first 2 years. So lectures by different doctors, anatomy, dissecting the cadavers. And so there was not that on the spot seeing patients in a clinical setting that can be, you're on. You have to think in someone's face as opposed to studying by yourself and then taking a test. So yeah, that transition was a little tough, but I got through it. However, things changed for me once I started residency training right after graduating from medical school. My program was in the Valley, San Fernando Valley, and I was one of actually one of two African Americans in a group of 24 other residents. So, I wasn't a majority in that situation. And what happened was, due to the fact that there's not that much self-care that was being promoted or, in training, with the 80-hour work weeks going on, with just being on all the time, like I said, being responsible for people's lives, although you're young and you just came out of medical school, I felt a lot of pressure. I felt a little bit like a fish out of water. And I didn't feel like I fully had support, meaning although there were others there with me, it still felt alone. So, emotionally, I was in a space that I had never been in before, where I eventually started to kind of sink in a downward spiral where I stopped eating. I felt like I need to study more to know more. But if I'm not eating and I'm not sleeping, I'm not going to retain anything. So then that wasn't really working out. And then I was actually 30 miles from my parents in LA County, but not like down the street for them. So when I saw them, it wasn't that often. So I was really alone, feeling to the point where I spiraled down and was just thinking about not living, not wanting to be here anymore, which is totally the opposite of how the first 25 years of my life was, because since I was a child, I went to the doctor, everything was going smooth, full tuition scholarship, everybody paying for my tuition.
Dr. Clarke. Wait. Did you just say that during that time, you felt like you didn't want to be here anymore? Like things would be better if you just ended your life. Is that what you're telling us?
Yeah, and so, yes. Well, let's put it this way: it was more like the passive suicidal thoughts, which is not really an act to do something, just like I don't want to live anymore type of thoughts. But then it started to get into more actions, which I will not get into detail just for the sake of not, providing ideas. But the whole thing was that I knew I was not safe, quote unquote safe. I didn't feel safe by myself. Like I was scared to be with me. So that's a scary feeling when you're scared of yourself. And so I learned from medical school, when you are suicidal, you go to the hospital. It was just like, this is what I learned from the lecture. So this is what I'm going to do. So I literally drove myself from Silmar to my parents' house and said, take me to the hospital. I need to go to the hospital. I didn't feel safe. And so, yeah, they did that. It was just so eye-opening experience. I'd never been in that situation before. Of course, I was not going to tell anybody I was a doctor, because of that stigma associated with oh my gosh, why the doctor? Because the thought is you have it all together, or, you're on top of the world. Why are you even here? So no one knows a doctor. And eventually I spent a couple of days there and got out, but I've not returned to my training program I was in until 3 months later. The program director, she was actually supportive in regards to me being able to return once I was better. I did get therapy. I did take medications, to help me out, to stabilize everything upstairs. And I got through the first year. So I did first year, but I was not going to finish the rest. Now, I don't want to monopolize the whole time of this talk here, but let's just put it this way. The whole experience just opened my eyes in regards to, if your mental health is not taken care of, nothing else even matters. Like nothing else, for example, I have a patient and they're depressed. They're not going to be motivated to take their insulin or take care of themselves and eat right because their mind is not okay, right? So the brain, emotions, basically controls everything else. So it just really was an eye-opener for me, and it makes me more of an advocate to tell people, take care of yourselves. Self-care is fundamental. And like Dr. Chavez said, in regards to finding community, that's important too, because isolation is something that can definitely lead you down the depressive funnel, and that's not good. So stay connected is basically the message, and get help.
Wow. Thank you guys so much. And thank you, Dr. Clarke, for sharing your experience. And what I gleaned from that is you felt that you were not well. So you recognized that and told your parents, you told someone and said, take me to the hospital. So for those of you out there, if you just don't feel like yourself, tell someone, please. tell someone. And I am so happy that you're here with us, Dr. Clarke. So glad you are here with us. And I just want to talk, I want to stay on that, right? I want to stay on that, what you just said. And we all think, like you stated, well, being a doctor, oh, well, you have it together, right? You're an MD. Well, Dr. Chavez, he has it together. He's a PhD. Evan has it together. Oh my gosh, he's at Yale. Oh man, you guys just have it together. But research has shown that people in healthcare, they are more likely to commit suicide. You know, we saw that with COVID. A lot of nurses were committing suicide.
Mhm.
We just heard about Dr. Mortimer, who was a student at my school, George Washington University, and she was a first year medical resident. She committed suicide. So talk to me, what are the factors that are at play? I know you touched on one of them, which is the 80-hour work week. Can you just go a little bit more in depth with that? Please, Dr. Clarke. Just
It's
being overworked, overtaxed, overburdened. Walk us through that.
overworked. I mean, sleep deprivation in general, whether or not you're a doctor, is a problem. You know, it's almost as if you're drunk and you cannot think clearly. So, you know, that still is a thing in regards to long hours currently, which to me, I still haven't wrapped my head around the logic in it, just because we're health promoters. However, our training in our environment in education, it's not really promoting health. Now, I don't want to say it's not happening at all. I feel like slowly but surely things are starting to change. There's starting to be more of an eye-opening awakening in regards to the need for wellness, but there's still those long hours, 24-hour calls. You know, you're making decisions for people's lives, and a lot of them at the same time. You know, so I can't wrap my head around that. Also, I would say, at least in my experience, the expectation, you're always on, like you're being asked questions all the time. You know, you're expected to give the answer right now and to have it all figured out. That's pressure. You know, so it's kind of almost, if the thought was, because you're in this high status position, that's more reason why you should be stressed out, right? Like, why is it thinking that you got all together so that you're not going to be stressed? No, because I got this going on, that's more of a reason to be stressed, right? Wouldn't that kind of make sense? Like, I would think if you don't have that going on, you shouldn't be stressed, right? But anyway, so that's not true. Like, I'm not minimizing anyone's experiences, but I just think that in general, the culture or the community should be a lot more recognizing that doctors and healthcare professionals are humans. We're humans. You know, we have blood that comes out of our veins with pulses and everything. So, and not to say you disrespect us, but just kind of realize that we hurt too, you know. And I will touch on just one topic in regards to Dr. Mortimer passing away. I started to think about it a little bit more, and I'm like, maybe all of us dying is part of the reason why there's such a healthcare worker shortage, you know? Like, think about it. Unfortunately, the statistics are 300 to 400 doctors or medical students die by suicide each year. So that's one person a day is ending their life. And if that one person had a panel of 300 patients, let's say they did primary care, do the math, you know, over times 300 people, that's almost 1 million patients without care, right? If you think of it that way. So it's kind of like we would probably be less stressed out if the burden was distributed more, because we had more of a workforce, because people are not dying, right? So it's kind of like my thought process is, for me sharing my story, my hope is that, you know, other healthcare professionals can come out the closet, so to speak, and say, I mean, you don't have to give all the details of your experience, but you can normalize not being well and getting help in order to be well, right? Because as Dr. Chavez said again, there's community. So if there's a medical student who feels alone because maybe their mentor never expressed any type of sadness or distress about their position, then they're going to feel more isolated and more alone because, well, my mentor never talked about stress and they got it all together. What's wrong with me, right? I get passionate about it, but it's kind of like I really want to incite like a Me Too movement, so to speak, for healthcare professionals, where we come out of the closet. I mean, I'm one. I have over 24,000 views on YouTube of my 5-minute testimony, which I just shared here. but I'm just one person. I represent an African-American female physician, which is 3% of physicians. So what about the Caucasian ones, the Latino people who've had experiences and overcome it? What about the Indian people who have experienced, the Asian people, and that we represent more of the reality of our healthcare force to encourage the next generation and keep us all well. That's just my thought.
Absolutely. I think that that's amazing. And we should look into that long work week. I remember doing a talk at blackdoctor.org, and there were so many physicians who are well seasoned in the audience. And I said, medicine is changing. I mean, these students, they're not like you, where they had to walk 5 miles in the snow to medical school. They had to stand for 36 hours straight, or, it's something, of course, totally exaggerated, but it is something that we need to do because we have to change it. We're human. And when I worked at a medical school, I've worked at 2 medical schools, and just seeing the students, how they were stressed. And I'm so thankful that at Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science, we provided opportunities for our 3rd-year medical students, because those were my babies. We provided them opportunities for mindfulness and student wellness, and even coming back to CDU, seeing how this university has changed. And even at Howard University, big ups to HU, they had a mental health day. So everything was shut down on a Friday. And I thought that was so beautiful. So I want to turn it to Dr. Chavez and Evan. Do you all have any follow-ups, or did you want to add to that? Just, as a healthcare professional, seeing that students do commit suicide, medical students and folks in the healthcare profession. Any thoughts about that?
I mean, I'm not a practitioner, I'm not a clinician, so I don't see patients, and so, what Dr. Clarke is sharing, I don't have the experience of like balancing, different roles with, seeing patients and making sure that I'm there for them and provide the most quality, healthcare that's important, right? But I want to mention a concept that I not too long ago I was learning about, and it's sort of tied to my research on, understanding the, how young people work on issues of social justice, but the burnout that also happens with activists and people in the community trying to promote social change, but also seeing, how challenging it is to do that work, and suffering, mental health challenges as a result of that. And, so there's a concept called moral injury that is basically happens when, you feel like you're engaging in actions or behaviors that goes against your values. So it's like contradicting who you are and what you believe in, what you're passionate about, what you think is important. And I see that whether it's healthcare practitioners or researchers or activists in the community, I think there's this aspect where, we have we're guided by a set of values and what we think is important, and a purpose and a meaning. And we want to really help address issues of inequities and injustices in the community. And for patients, the reason that there's, so many disparities are really tied to a lot of the social determinants. But yet we're seeing that the systems as they are designed and structured, it doesn't help. It just further perpetuates more problems and more inequities. And so I think that's another layer to it, that it adds additional stress and, anger and a lot of emotions, complex emotions, where you feel that it's daunting work to do and overwhelming. And sometimes you're sort of battling, like trying to have hope that it could change and it could be better. And there the environments for, medical students or trainees for doctors can be better. So then you don't have those rates of suicide, right, that you see. that doctors are able to like help people. And I think, the way the systems are set up is it's sort of now, the hospitals is really about, there's like the business model that dominates, and it's about making money and profits, and the doctors are constrained in what they're able to do. And then that, I think, is a moral injury, right? So that, I think, impacts one's mental health at a different level, because it's not just that, we're working hard and we're stressed, and that's part of the process, right? But then there's the toxic stress, which should not exist. There's stress that's normal, we all need it, and sometimes it's a healthy dose of stress is good to help us adapt and work better. But when it becomes toxic and oppressive, that's where like it's different. That should not exist.
That part, the toxic, oppressive stress that has now been accepted as professionalism. It's now been accepted as a form of acceptable hazing to our medical students, So yes, you hit the nail on the head, Dr. Chavez. You hit the nail on the head. Did you have anything to add, Evan? Because I know life at Yale, woohoo.
I will say, just from the perspective of somebody going into medical school in the near future, I actually today had a really interesting discussion with a group of medical students and undergraduate students who are applying to medical school. And we had a panel of medical school admissions representatives, and somebody had asked them, are we allowed to basically mention our mental health struggles in our applications? And we had a little, I guess you'd call it a debate, talking about this, because people are really afraid to even mention that as part of their history, as part of their identities. I think even coming out of that, even though the answers that the admissions representatives gave were encouraging, we're still scared to mention that. And a lot of us, we're sitting here at the very, very beginnings of our careers, looking forward to sort of increasing levels of stress over the years. And if at this point we're afraid to reach out and look for resources, if at this point we're already being expected to sort of act in this way where we're performing as if we are perfect, as if we have everything together, I can't imagine it getting any better going down the line if this is our starting point.
Yeah, and that's why it's up to students like you to challenge the status quo and challenge authority. One thing that I did when I was here at CDU and even at UCSD, I was a student leader. So if it meant protesting, if it meant writing a letter to the accrediting agency just to talk about, what's going on, to sit and speak with faculty about, what students encounter and these issues that are facing their mental health, because you guys are the next generation. So, it's something that's needed. So thank you for that. Thank you, Evan. I want to follow up though with that. Why is it that this topic of the mental health of our healthcare providers, why isn't it discussed so openly or so readily? Because I know when I was organizing this webinar, someone was saying, oh, wow, people don't talk about this a lot. And I said, really? Because I've heard it. I've heard it buzzing around. So why don't we talk about this a lot, Dr. Clarke?
Well, I just think it goes back to the stigma associated with medical professionals or healthcare providers having any mental health issues or challenges. It just looks bad, and it doesn't make sense to me. And to me, it just perpetuates the whole cycle of what I was just discussing before in regards to if it's hush hush and you can't take care of yourself, then you get rid of yourself, right? Because no one's supposed to do that. I can't tell anybody because it's a secret. So then everybody ends up knowing about it when you're gone, right? That's and the sad thing about Dr. Mortimer is that she was actually a real advocate and like working to try to change things within her residency program, unionizing and everything. And it's sad because I don't know all the details for her situation, but she's trying to make change, right? And so maybe there was so much opposition for that, that was the result, which was unfortunate, So it's like, and that's why, and I'm not trying to beat a dead horse with my situation, but I feel like, if we can't change the system, we can only control ourselves, right? Like, the system has been ingrained or there a long, long time. So I don't expect what I'm proposing to just overnight be a thing. But, back to similar to the Me Too movement, when enough people come up, it draws attention to it, right? It makes it more, it'll actually make the system change because they'll feel pressure to change because there's so much buzz about it and so much, discussion, they can't ignore it. But as long as it's kept under the rug, then they can keep doing what's going on and nothing changes, So, yeah, it's just we're on supposed to be the cream of the crop or whatever, and we can't fail, and and that's unfortunate because I mean I won't say her name, but there is one particular person who her whole mission is to prevent suicide amongst physicians, and a lot of times some programs they don't even tell anybody what really happened. They might say, oh, they just had a personal incident, or tell the patients, oh, the person. They don't mention the word suicide because of the stigma, because that might turn cause questions to be asked. Well, what's going on? Then they might have to say what's going on and what we're doing, through the culture and the environment. So one person can't change it, so we all have to come together, to make things change.
Yeah, and it's just like what Dr. Chavez stated, just with that hospital model being more of a business model, where
Right.
Just these unrealistic expectations on, physicians, nurses, and even staff. So I want to shift because someone put a comment in the Q&A box, and I want to encourage everyone that's here. If you have a question for any of our esteemed panelists, please use the Q&A box to do that. I'm going to read this comment, and I'm not going to say the person's name, but this is a great statement. They state, I agree. I am Indian, and I wanted to share about someone I knew in college who died in his early 20s in med school. He had consumed an excessive amount of alcohol and passed out in his car. He went to the University of Michigan Medical School, so I'm not sure if it was hypothermia or alcohol poisoning. It was so tragic and haunts me to this day. He used alcohol to cope. But this story, I mean, these are things that happened. I remember being at an undergrad at UC San Diego, and my roommate's friend, he had, it was drug-induced schizophrenia, and my heart just went out to him. And that's how he coped with the pressure, by smoking marijuana. And he went to smoke with someone and they laced it with something, and his life, it was never the same. So thank you for sharing that comment. So I do have a question for all of you. And I want to start with you, Dr. Chavez. What stressors do you encounter on your job? People may think, oh my goodness, you're a professor. You get to lecture awesome students. Oh my gosh, you have it made. You get to do your research. Oh man, but what stressors do you encounter on your job, Dr. Chavez?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I mean, I can say that I'm happy with my job, and I love what I do, and I love teaching and engaging with students. And I think what I love is also that I'm learning. I continue learning. I'm in in a career that in a way you're paid to learn, right? As you're doing the research and you're teaching, you're learning the material more in a deeper way. So I'm just always drawn to, I think what also drove me to go into this career is like the curiosity I had about learning about different topics, stuff like that. And in science and research that there's a space where you can do that. But it's stressful still, right? Because I have a family. I have 2 daughters. I have a wife. I have, a mom and sisters, mom, dad. that is, away, and she just visited us, so then you're happy to see her, but I don't get to see her that often, right? And I worry about her as she worries about me, right? And then I now worry about my daughters, right? So it's that finding balance with your life that you have outside of your job, and that can get tricky because there's moments where it is a lot more. I get busier, with some weeks are not as busy as other weeks. Some weeks that I have deadlines with grants, or grading papers or doing exams, and so it varies, right? And then different challenges happen in terms of, like, I early career faculty, so then I have to make sure that I productive, right? That I show that I, the metrics in terms of productivity of publications and grants and stuff like that. And it's a challenging world. Like, it's competitive to get grants, right? Especially, I think it's gotten more competitive. And so it's just like the busy schedule and everything that you have to juggle. It sometimes can get to me, right? That stress. And so I then have to recognize my symptoms and when I feel that I'm becoming a little more exhausted, my body and my mind. And with the help of my wife, that she reminds me, take a break and not just be stuck to your computer, right? But sometimes I have deadlines I feel like I need to do this. And then I'm like, I have multiple projects going on, right? And then mentoring students, which I love, but it also can become challenging if it's multiple students at the same time with multiple projects. So that stress never ends, right? And I think right now it's going well overall because I'm not experiencing toxic stress, right? But that I did experience during my postdoc, and that was a terrible experience, because it was where I felt like I was being exploited and oppressed in terms of doing the work, right, for someone else, for like the PI. And that's pretty common. That happens a lot, unfortunately, in science and medicine, where you have postdocs and graduate students that go through a lot, as and I'm sorry to hear of the friend that passed away, right? That person that just shared the tragic story, that there are people going through a lot, and they feel like sometimes it's not genuine, like the space where they can feel like they can get the support and help that they need. And because of the culture, I guess for me, that I study the topic of culture, and I'm applying that to understanding how we have a culture that doesn't foster, and oftentimes, unfortunately, that sense of community. And it is, I think for me, it's really tied to what are the roots of that. The question is like, what are the roots of that? And for me, it's like white supremacy, and it's this historical racism that, and understanding what are the characteristics of white supremacy. And it's perfectionism. It's like quantitative over qualitative. It's like urgency. It's like, paternalism, people exerting power over other people and not allowing different diverse voices to be, contributed and integrated into making decisions and changes, and not tolerating comfort, people that are empowered, not wanting to be challenged and questioned. And so we have very specific characteristics of a particular culture that is, that is very systemic, and that shows up, and I think, in our workspaces and our society in different ways, and manifests in different ways. And then that's what affects us. I think that sort of causes a moral injury, that we feel like we need to do things differently. I want to help people. I want to help people that are suffering and living in poverty, and that affects their health. But then it's these systems, that way that they're set up, it doesn't really help and doesn't allow you to do that oftentimes, right? So it's and when I see that, right, and then that also causes stress, because you feel like you want to create change, and then you don't see that happening, and it could be difficult sometimes.
Yep, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. Thank you, Dr. Chavez. Evan, so what stressors do you encounter in your studies? Talk to us.
So I spoke a little bit about this, but of course, just managing a heavy workload and also adjusting to being in a new space. You know, we talk a little bit about imposter syndrome, but I feel like we don't talk a lot about what to do about it. Because for me, you know, I moved to the other side of the country. I started a new school, which the makeup, I came from an all-girls school going to a co-ed school. So it looks very different from the way my education looked in middle school and high school. And I had to learn how to navigate this space and not lose my sense of self. And I think that that's probably the biggest stressor that I faced. And something that's like Dr. Chavez mentioned this earlier, finding those communities and battling that isolation. For me, I really found community in the Afro-American Cultural Center at my school. And I get to this year going into being able to be a peer liaison and helping the new first years make that transition. I think it's really important to come back to those communities and being able to foster that greater community in my school is really important to me. And there's also, it's also possible to make those changes on an institutional level. At my school, we just had an organization that was founded in memory of a student who had committed suicide called Eli's for Rachel. And that group was actually able to change the legislation on my school's level, because we had an issue where students who went to the hospital for mental health issues were forced to take a leave of absence from school and then had to reapply to come back. And, you know, a lot of us saw a big issue with this because we weren't creating a community for those students to come back to. We weren't supporting them. You know, they had to move out as soon as they checked out of that hospital. And I'm really proud of the group that was able to make that change. And now those students do not have to take that leave, and they are able to come back without reapplying and going through a whole application process. They don't have to take community college courses before coming back in anymore. But I think that it's really important to come back to those communities that do provide you with being around people that look like you, being around people that that can really support you in those struggles that you may face. And sometimes that can look like advocacy, and sometimes that can also just look like places where you can be yourself.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm so proud that you guys were able to advocate for that change and to enact change. So that's a part of it, you guys, just advocacy and coming together, as everyone has stated, to enact change. So before we jump into some questions, because oh my gosh, we have another question in the Q&A box, but oh man, you guys, this conversation has been so good. It's 5:48. We have still a little bit more to cover. So I want to ask you this. So COVID-19, it brought out the term self-care, right? We have to take care of ourselves. So briefly, each of you, talk to me about how you take care of yourself. I'm gonna start with you, Dr. Clarke.
That's hilarious, actually. I'll be honest with you. It's always a work in progress. It is a work in progress. I know ideally what self-care involves, but I'll be frank, I don't always do it. But I will say self-care is one way of self-care I've actually recently incorporated is setting boundaries, meaning as altruistic as we want to be as healthcare providers, or those in this professional space in medicine or health, we have to know when it's time to take care of ourselves, when it's time to leave certain elements at work and not bring them home, right? And for example, I like to a little bit control everything. That's just how I am. But I need to know how to delegate certain tasks that don't necessarily require an MD to do. Like if a patient's asking me to, follow up on their referral somewhere and there's a person designated to do that, right? One self-care boundary for myself is to assign that person who's supposed to do that instead of me just going ahead you know what I mean, and doing it, and then essentially taking time away from other things I could be doing that, you know what I mean, that are a little bit more productive just to preserve my energy, you
Yep.
know, so that is an aspect of self-care. And I'm supposed to say exercise, and I'm supposed to say eat right, and I'm supposed to say, well, okay, let me be serious. So one thing I do is I practice, I have a gratitude journal. So every day I write down what I'm grateful for. That has really mentally done a shift. I've done that since last year, January. And it's really been wonderful because it just shifts your thinking. It makes you just appreciate little things so that if I'm down, I'm able to go back and reflect on what I've written previously and encourage myself and be lifted up. So that is something I definitely do. Practice,
I
self-care,
love that.
journaling, gratitude,
I love that.
and pray, and pray, and pray. I said that number one, pray.
Oh yeah, pray every day. All right,
Mhm.
Evan.
I will also give a little bit of an unconventional answer to the self-care questions. I already spoke about the support circles and time management, working in time to take care of yourself and call your family and all of that. I will say something else is just finding your people in the spaces, in the academic spaces, and choosing those spaces, because for me, just something that I've been working on is coming into these more competitive environments, going into being a pre-med. For me, there's a big shift just going from, I'm a humanities major that's pre-med. There's a big shift just going from those science classes to those humanities classes, hour by hour. And being able to find those friends in my classes that are in the same boat as me, that I can lean on, that we're supportive of each other and not really playing too much into that competitive environment has been a big aspect of self-care for me.
Yep, that part. And I will say, for all the students out there, whether you're an undergrad, high school student, community college student, don't share your big ideas with small-minded people. Keep that to yourself. Don't share your big ideas with small-minded people. Guard your joy. Don't allow anyone to steal your joy. It's yours. Joy is internal. Happiness is external, right? So I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Chavez. How do you take care of yourself?
Yeah, I think I'll echo what Dr. Clarke said, that we know what we need to do, right? Do sometimes, but then often, and sometimes we don't do it all the time, right? And it's hard to do for various reasons, right? And so it's, I mean, for me, it is just kind of taking, distancing myself from the work. And, for me, it's like on Saturdays, I try not to do any work. On Sundays, sometimes I have to, because then I teach on Mondays and I'm preparing and stuff. But at least like one day of the week where I dedicate to my family and my daughters, and we go out and, to a museum or to a park, or just here, hang out at home and not do anything. Just be watching something that's like not, I love watching documentaries, stuff that's educational, but sometimes I want to just watch something that's mindless, that you're not thinking, you're just kind of like resting and not worrying about the problems of the world and just being with, like Evan said, finding your space, your community. And for me, is my family, my wife and two beautiful daughters, right? Like, and that's my space where I feel safe, where I can, truly be myself. It's being yourself, finding that place where you can be yourself. And that, at least as much as I can, right, within the busy schedule that we have, that helps me. Yeah, and taking walks too when I can. Try to take a walk, and that helps me a lot as well.
I love it. I love it. I like how you said your family, that's your safe space. I like that. That's beautiful. That is so beautiful. I'm gonna throw in what I do. As you guys heard, I'm the director of community college partnerships. One thing that I do, I don't check emails after after quitting time. I don't check emails. I don't respond to them. That's just a way for me to just maintain my boundaries. That's my time to just woosah. It's difficult out there. So please just maintain those boundaries and take care of you. So we have a question. Do you think things will improve as more people of color rise to leadership roles? Who wants to take that?
I mean, I could take it with you, just
Take it,
yeah,
Dr.
briefly,
Chavez.
just I mean, I think so. I would hope so, right? That as you have more people of color, more diverse perspectives and lived experiences, and you know, values that really match with the goals that we have in terms of like social change and social justice. I think that's going to help, right? And having the power, being in a position where you are able to have the power to be implement things that match, you know, the your values for social justice, right? Um, then I think that's going to help, right? I think it's we need, obviously, even in terms of the support. You have more people of color leadership positions, but we're talking about even when you're in a leadership position, you don't have it all like taken care of, right? You need help, and
Right.
our leaders need support, and so having that support, so then the leaders are able to do the work, and it's done in community, right? Even it's not just the leader doing the work; it's always in a group of people, a team, a community. But if you do have, yeah, obviously more folks of different backgrounds in power, I think you start making more changes.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's a team of people. I know in our division of student affairs, Dr. Kiosha Partlow, she's our leader. She's the associate provost, and she's great. I mean, just having our retreats and all of that, I think just building community among just the various staff members, I think that's amazing. And then of course mentorship. So yeah, it's possible. It's possible. So I want to end on this question, and it's a doozy, but hey, this is what we do in the Lion's Den. So if we were to create a healing community for our healers, what would it look like? I'm going to start off with you, Dr. Chavez.
Um, I mean, I think it's really creating a safe space with no judgment, what we've been talking about, and that you feel connected. You can be vulnerable, you can be yourself. You feel like you can trust people that you're working with. And it allows you to really develop your fullest potential, and continue growing and learning. And having the support along the way. We at the core is, I think, the social support, and then I think those values of social justice are important. There's a whole term of like a concept called healing justice that is really, I think, that I learned a few years ago, and tied to my work, my research in social justice for young people. And it's Sean Ginwright that does a lot of work on healing justice, one of the pioneers of that field, and working with young Black men. And it's basically, he argues that our healing is not just clinical, it's political. It's really about that social change, and it's tied to issues of power, and you have to tackle that, and in order to facilitate you being able to foster spaces where you can be safe and you can find your people, when you find your community. So I think that's important.
I love it. I love it. Dr. Clarke, what would this healing community look like?
I think part of the healing community would be also just kind of sharing resources with each other in regards to like what has helped you get better, what are you doing? Like I talked about the gratitude journal that helped me. Someone else might say whatever, just sharing what you're doing, just to give each other support and ideas of how to self-care and keep each other well. Because kind of like what Evan was talking about, there's like this competitive space that I do believe just carries on from each level, which is going back to my whole thing, which is probably why we're in this situation where no one's going to talk about it, because it's like survival of the fittest. I'm not going to share my secret as to what got me still here, because I'm still here. And that's not loving each other. That's not really a supportive community, so just sharing what our secrets are to success mentally. Also, let's say from the perspective of our patients in the community, just kind of understanding, like I said, doctors are human, in the form of like being patient if you have to wait a little longer than you want to when you're in the clinic, right? Because everyone's situation is different. We can't just pop them out everyone's case is not the same. And so just if others can realize there's other people besides you coming to the doctor, which is why it might be taking long, that we're not watching YouTube or anything like that in the back, just so the community can be more sensitive and, foster our wellness as well. And little things like, if, look in your bottle, if you have a refill, don't call us for more medicine, talk to the pharmacy. Just little things that have to offload the extra burdens that are not necessary from a community standpoint. And us just loving each other in a helpful way.
I love it. I love it. Evan, bring us home.
I don't have that much to add, but I will say a healing community. I'm just thinking of a place where everybody has a support group to go back to, where we're able to speak openly to each other about what's going on in our lives and what challenges we're facing, where we're not being expected to just churn out results, where we're actually able to keep our purpose in mind and having the space to do that and having the space to be a little bit creative and explore and do what we're really passionate about. Yeah.
Can I add one more part of that too? Now that I thought about it some more. Also, just an environment of acceptance, like accepting us for as we are, who we are, and not expecting everyone to be the same cookie cutter person, right? So that we can be appreciated for our uniqueness, our individuality, our creativity, like Evan mentioned, and not expect it to be like everyone else. Just, acceptance really of who we are as individuals.
Absolutely. I totally agree. So, panelists, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. Dr. Clarke, Evan, Dr. Chavez, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us in the Lion's Den. And thank you to our wonderful audience for joining us. I do hope something was said that will inspire you to go out there and either get help or support someone who's struggling. And if you're interested in pursuing a career in medicine or psychology or what have you, please check us out at Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science. That's www.cdrewu.edu. Thank you so much, you guys. And you know what? Stay tuned for next week because we have our youth panel. And yes, and you guys also #keep healers safe. Hashtag it on your social media. #keep healers safe. Get out there and spread the word because we have to keep our healers safe, because if they're not safe, then what are we? All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one. Panelists, stay on. Okay. Bye.